Montezuma's gold is not a legend at all, it's not a theory, it's a fact. The problem is, where is the gold?
Montezuma's son took 3,000 of his soldiers and gathered up that gold and moved it.
My grandfather started out by looking for a treasure, but what he found was a quest, a life goal to solve the mystery of the stone tablets.
In 1964, Life magazine ran an article that chronicled the discovery of the stone tablets and set off what many would call a modern-day gold rush.
He knew he could break it because it was hard, something that he had to do.
He says, I cracked it, I solved it.
He knew where everything was. You know, like if he put it there himself.
But you find something of great value, and somebody else is going to want to take it away from you as soon as they can.
Is it possible that so many legends, each bearing a minuscule grain of truth, could all historically collide in a single set of simple stone tablets? In 1949, in a little-known place called Florence Junction, Arizona, a man on vacation, later identified as Travis Tomlinson of Oregon, stumbled across an elusive mystery lying just under the sand and dust of the Arizona desert. What he found over 2 subsequent trips into Arizona were a group of unusually carved sandstone tablets depicting what many believe is a map to buried treasure. The story of the Dillman family and their search for the elusive treasure of Montezuma incorporates 3 generations of the Dillman family and is a story over 500 years in the making. In 1964, Life magazine ran an article that chronicled the discovery of the stone tablets and set off what many would call a modern-day gold rush. But for the Dillman family of California, it would become a real-life, modern-day Indiana Jones adventure.
My grandfather started looking into the mystery of the stone tablets in about 1965, when he and my uncles discovered an article in a magazine.
When he got a hold of that, him and brother, they just spent hours trying to go there, trying to get maps, trying to find a way to get up there and how to start it.
I didn't get involved until I was about 9 years old. By that time, my grandfather was just about to make this amazing discovery in 1982.
It just rolled like a ball rolling downhill. It just kept on and kept on.
In the spring of 1965, while cleaning out a basement space for a local woman and family friend, Raymond Dillman and his sons, Paul and John, happened to come across a copy of the 1964 Life magazine with the article about the stone tablets in a pile of garbage. Instead of throwing it away as they normally might have, one of the boys happened to take an interest in the magazine and took it home to read at a later time.
Almost for a week, we gazed over the pictures, we read certain things out of the book, we read things in the magazine. Then we started to get more information to read about the lost Dutchman. We got more information from the library to read about the Peralta family.
So he goes, first I'm going to find out what these symbols mean. Then I'm going to find out what these mean, and the priests and the witch. So that's what he did. He broke it down piece by piece.
But he says, I think we got something here very unusual, and I think we got something here very important. And he says, I think that if we spend a little bit more time and a little more research, he says, and from what I know of your mother's side of the family, I could probably solve what these stone tablets say.
Grandfather was able to solve the stone symbols and writings by using information from my great-grandparents. My great-grandfather was of Yaqui Indian, and my great-grandmother was of Mexican and Aztec descent. With their help, he was really able to read and decipher many of the older Spanish symbols because great-grandpa taught him how to read them.
What is known about the stone tablets is that there are 4, each weighing approximately 25 to 30 pounds. They are identified by name as the priest stone, the horse stone, the trail stone, and the heart stone. The priest stone depicts the picture of a priest with outstretched arms holding a cross. The horse stone is illustrated with a picture of a large horse and other markings surrounding it. The trail stone depicts what many believe is an outline map with multiple points and many other significant characters and markings. And the heart stone is actually two pieces. A slab of stone marked much like the trail stone, yet carved from its center is an intricate heart-shaped cleft, which holds a second, more precisely carved heart shape that fits into the cutout on the larger stone. When the trail stone and the heart stone are properly aligned, they appear to depict what many believe is a map whose origins are mysterious at best, yet lead to something very special. Though the arguments on either side of the stone tablet debate may be compelling, one would have to have all the information and facts available to make an informed conclusion. And what most experts on the subject do not know is that in 1982, Ray Dillman of California, armed with information gleaned from the enigmatic stone tablets, uncovered a wondrous discovery deep in the mountains of Utah. And that this humble man and his two sons, John and Paul, using only the information contained in the stone tablets, may have located what may be the best proof to date that the stone tablets are indeed real, and may also someday lead to the elusive mythical Aztec homeland of Aztlan and the lost treasure of the great Aztec warrior king, Montezuma himself. The genesis of our story is in 1519 when Hernan Cortez first sailed for the gold-laden coast of the Americas, a voyage that would bring him face to face with the legendary Aztec king Montezuma in what is now the country of Mexico.
There are really a number of historical facts you have to know to make the story of the creation of the stone tablets completely plausible. You have to know that the Aztec people migrated into what is now Mexico, to the Aztec capital city of Tenochtitlan, from a place that they called Aztlan, which we now believe was located in and around Utah.
The history of the conquest of Mexico reads like a fairy tale or a science fiction story. It began a long time before the arrival of the conquistadors, when a small tribe decided to go south.
It was a vision that led the Aztecs from their homeland in Aztlan. It was the eagle devouring the snake that was the sign that they had reached their new home.
And they say, this is the place where we are going to make our city, that they call Tenochtitlan. And the city became a marvel of the time.
This huge, beautiful city that was bigger than any city that Europe had, more beautiful than the cities of Europe. It was clean, it was well painted, well groomed, an incredible city that the Europeans had never had any idea, had never seen anything like it before.
In 1519, Velázquez decided to go in a third expedition, and then he appointed Hernan Cortez, who was the person in charge of the city of Santiago de Cuba, as the captain general of a new expedition.
When the Spanish first arrived in Mesoamerica, the area around Mexico City, the Spanish friars began writing down as much as they could about the culture of the Aztecs, even as it was being destroyed.
Montezuma, having a huge army, was scared of the people who had arrived.
The priests had a vision that at a certain time, a certain day, Topazis and Quetzalcoatl, their god, would reappear on this date.
The Aztec kings had been merely caretakers of Quetzalcoatl's land until he returned. And that Montezuma would then return the city to Quetzalcoatl, who would then rule as the god leader of the nation.
Quetzalcoatl, according to the legend, came from the east, from planet Venus. He was tall, white, and bearded. And he was a different type of god. He was a Pacific god. He told them the crafts, art, and how to plant, and he was again human sacrifices. Then the evil gods of the Aztecs didn't like Quetzalcoatl at all, and began conspiring against him. And finally, Quetzalcoatl got so upset that he left in a raft made out of serpent skin, and he flew back to planet Venus. But he said, one day I'll be back.
So it is into this setting that Cortez arrives. This is why he received the cooperation he did. That's why he was welcomed into the city instead of rejected as a foreigner or as an invading body.
Montezuma treated them like gods. He ordered his men not to fight the Spaniards, and he gave them gifts of gold. Then even when he saw the interest of the Spaniards in gold, he showed them a full room full of gold and precious stones, and that even enticed more the Spaniards.
Montezuma figured that he was Christ because he was white, and he was told that the white man had come back to him, and so they worshiped the man and gave him anything he wanted. But his men got greedy.
The Aztecs rebelled against Montezuma and killed him and began attacking the Spaniards. And the Spaniards suffered many losses, and they had to retreat from the city of Tenochtitlan, and they took a lot of gold with them, the more they can carry.
Montezuma's son took 3,000 of his soldiers, and they broke that wall down and gathered up that gold when Cortez was getting ready to come in, and moved it.
So that leads to the myth of where did the gold go? Because it wasn't there when Cortez got there. I mean, they got a lot of gold out of Mexico City. Spain's empire was built on the gold that they did get out, gold and silver that they did get out of Mexico. But there was more, apparently, and it was gone by the time Cortez got there. Where did it go? That's the question.
Cortez's lust for the Aztec king's treasure would end in the death of Montezuma and an exodus by his mystical people from the Aztec capital city of Tenochtitlan, and would provide the necessity for the Aztec people to move their gold and treasure to a place very far away from the greedy Spaniards.
The Hollywood vision of history is that there are the good guys and the bad guys. For some people, the good guys are the Aztecs and the bad guys are the Spaniards. For some people, the good guys are the Spaniards and the bad guys were the Aztecs. No, they were all bad guys. There is no good guys in history.
Some treasure hunters, treasure seekers, or archaeologists that are looking and trying to find this and have some pretty good ideas or pretty good speculations. But here again, with rolling a rock over the opening of the cave and throwing some dirt over it and letting plants grow over it over several years of disuse, it's going to be very difficult to find, and the whole idea is to keep it safe from people stumbling across it.
On June 12, 1964, Life magazine ran an article about the stones titled Mysterious Maps to Lost Gold Mines, linking them to the Lost Dutchman mine. Another article about them in True West magazine in 1966 further helped to add fuel to the fire of mystery. Still, for almost 20 years, no one could claim to have deciphered the messages contained on the stones.
15 years after they were discovered, or 12 or 13 years after the discovery was made public in Life magazine, there was still nobody who could claim that they have any knowledge about the stone tablets and their origin. I think that is what interested my grandfather the most.
I can remember every night he's trying to find out this and writing letters to this, and it just became an obsession. He just had to find out what was next. What's on the next page? Why did this priest look like with a witch hat? Why was he carrying a cross? Why there's a number here? It took him over.
He wasn't interested in the treasure of the gold. He was interested in proving his theory that he could solve the mystery of these stone tablets.
I think the world needs to know what my grandfather and uncles have done and what they've discovered. It is incredible that 20 years after the initial discovery of the tablets, through a stroke of fate or chance, kismet, the opportunity to solve the mystery would literally just fall into my family's lap. And I truly do not believe that that was a coincidence.
Though some suggest the tablets are the creation of the conquistadors or even some mysterious unknown Mexican author, the Peralta stone tablets are primarily named for a wealthy Spanish family that many believe owned large productive mines in the area of Sonora, Mexico, and even further north into the Superstition Mountains. Some treasure hunters believe that the Peralta family may have created the stone tablets as a map to locate known mining locations or hidden caches where they had buried their gold.
The Peralta family in Mexico has somehow been given credit for creating the stones, just because they were the owners of the Spanish land grant that included the territory around where the tablets were found in 1949.
There's these tablets that have been called Peralta, but I'm not sure they are Peralta or connected with the Peralta, so that's one big question. But there's, because of the Spanish writing on them, apparently that would, place them before the American period. And so then the question becomes, were they written by the Peraltas or were they written before the Peraltas?
In the legend, the Peralta family was set upon in 1848 by a large war party of Apache Indians at a place they call the Massacre Field. So it is said that Don Miguel ordered their mines' entrances to be covered and concealed so that no one outside of the family could ever discover their locations. But as fate would have it, on the trip back home to Sonora, the group would be attacked and many would be killed except for one or two Peralta family members, who would escape and ultimately make it back into Mexico. But they would only return to Mexico after creating the stone tablets to record their findings, and they would hide the heavy stone tablets for recovery at a later time, when they could reclaim them without being pursued by the Apache warriors.
First, I thought they were Peralta, but they go too far back.
The Peralta family assuredly would not have taken the time to carve heavy stone maps if they were running from the Apache Indians who were intent on lifting their scalps. That is one of the most harebrained hypotheses that anyone could have ever devised. Just because one of the stones has the name Don on it does not mean the old Don Peralta signed it. In Old Spanish, the word Don could mean donde, or where, or it could also mean sacred place, in Old Latin at least. So that word can mean a number of things.
So I'm not sure the name Peralta is going to stay attached to those stones.
Currently, the stone tablets are stored out of public display and owned by the Arizona Mineral and Mining Museum Foundation in Phoenix, Arizona. Many true believers say that would be a very unlikely place for unauthenticated fakes to reside. Another proposed connection to the Peralta stone tablets has been suggested almost since the day that the tablets were discovered. Due to their reported initial location in close proximity to the Superstition Mountains, many treasure hunters have claimed that the tablets themselves may have something to do with a man named Jacob Waltz.
Jacob Waltz was born in a town near Oberschwandorf in Germany, approximately 1810, but some researchers claim about 1808. And he immigrated to the United States in 1839. And he'd heard that if you weren't a citizen of the United States, you couldn't stake a claim on gold. And his whole dream was to come to America and find gold.
As the legend is told, Jacob Waltz and his partner, Jacob Weiser, were led to the location of a lost gold mine in the Superstition Mountains that had once been worked by the Don Miguel Peralta family of Mexico.
He worked the mine for, you might say, from about 1870s to 1881, I think is about the last time he actually went into the mountains.
And when he became very ill as a result of the flood of February 1891, he went up and spent time with his friend Julia Thomas, and she took care of him until he passed away on October 25th, 1891.
When the Dutchman passed away in 1891, the legend states that he had a grain sack or wooden box under his bed filled with high-grade ore, and that he had left behind several cryptic clues regarding the whereabouts of his now famous mine in the hands of a woman named Julia Thomas, who had cared for him when his health had begun to fail.
What started all of the legend is when he died in October 25th, 1891. There were two people present at his deathbed, Julia Thomas, a lady that cared for him, a young man named Reinhard Petrasch.
Julia and Reinhard Petrasch were with him at the time of his death, or when he was just ready to die, and they rushed out of the house, to go get a doctor, and they ran into Dick Holmes and Gideon Roberts walking down the street, and they said, "Oh, Jacob's dying, and will you guys go in there and watch him?" And supposedly, while they were there, Waltz remembered Holmes and gave him the 48 pounds of gold. Of course, Julia Thomas later said, no, that was not possible.
A man named Richard Holmes stole the ore when he was dying, or after he actually died. He broke in or went into the house. He knew Jacob Waltz.
From this point, a real controversy started. You might call it a great schism between the Petrasches and Thomas and the Holmes and that group, as far as the story of the Lost Dutchman gold mine went, and the tale of this 48 pounds of gold that was found under the bed.
Since his death, many have attempted to retrace or follow Waltz's trail through the Superstition Mountains, and though claims have been made many times that a discovery was imminent, no mine has ever been discovered that would match the untold wealth of the fabled Lost Dutchman mine.
The story of the Dutchman is really complex because so many people have intentionally conveyed bad information, and they've made rumor as fact just to throw everyone off the track because they want to find the mine. They don't want you to find it.
I don't think you can take the stone tablet and say, I'm going to go find the Lost Dutchman mine. At best, you might find 8 Peralta mines. Which one's the Dutchman?
I think it would be only natural for some people to assume that the Dutchman had something to do with the maps. The legend of his lost mine has been attributed to many things by many people, but his proposed link to the tablets doesn't really hold up when you know more about him. If he had authored them, they probably would have first of all been written in Dutch, and certainly not in Spanish. When the real truth is told, it is really more likely that the Dutchman stumbled onto a Peralta mine, or possibly even a cache of gold that had been stored and lost by the Spaniards or someone else. And he, like the Peraltas, was never even aware of the existence of the stone tablets.
Even though the warnings of impending danger and possible death are clearly and constantly provided for in the legend that surrounds the Lost Dutchman, that has not stopped adventurous men and women from trying to find the mine. And since its reported discovery, the legend and the search for the Lost Dutchman mine has mysteriously, and in some cases brutally, claimed more lives than can be accounted for here. But in the end tale, and for whatever reason, the Dutchman and his fabled mine have been indelibly linked to the mystery of the stone tablets forever, and no one has ever located the mine or lived to tell about it if they did. The mystery of the stone tablets, though linked more to the Lost Dutchman than any other legend, have created a stir and have sent repercussions throughout the scientific and archaeological communities. Ongoing debate has raged as to whether the stones are authentic, or are they an intentional example of misinformation planted to throw off future hunters, or could they simply be just an incredible and elaborate hoax perpetrated on an expectant and sometimes gullible public?
I think they're authentically carved. Whoever did them was a hell of an artist.
Most of the people that have transcribed these, it's like Looney Tunes. It's like one man said, if you look at the horse very carefully, the horse map, and he said, if you throw it on the floor and jump on it, he said, the horse will move and it'll show you where it goes. I mean, it's things like this that you hear all the time. You know, something within the realm of reality would be nice for a change.
The only way anybody could take these Peralta stone maps and figure them out is to be in the very spot that the man was when he carved it.
My grandfather said that it was his belief that Cabeza de Vaca and Estevanico the Black carved the tablets.
De Vaca's story would be historically more significant due to the fact that he would be the first Spaniard to accurately explore and chronicle much of the American Southwest.
De Vaca was a victim of circumstances. He shipwrecked in the Gulf of Mexico, and he walked for 8 years in unknown territory until he came out in Culiacan and saw the first Spanish man.
During his travels in 1528, De Vaca would claim to be captured by giant Native Americans and would live to tell a tale of his harsh and terrifying 6-year journey with them through the lands of the indigenous Indian people.
And accompanying him was a servant, a black man, a slave, called Estevanico. Apparently, Estevanico learned a lot from the natives.
During their time in captivity, they were allowed to see things that no other European had ever been privy to before. They were actually taken to places where the Indians mined and stored their gold.
De Vaca and his small party would eventually escape their captors, and they would wander aimlessly for 2 more years in the wilds of Mexico and Texas, until they were eventually rescued by a Spanish patrol.
My grandfather believed that they created the stone tablets that were found in Arizona, and it makes a great deal of sense that they would do that and hide them for retrieval at a later time.
De Vaca would later chronicle in his diary a detailed account of his capture and the incredible things he witnessed firsthand while in their custody. His astonishing tale would make its way back to Spain and would become the catalyst that would help to stimulate much of the exploration of the New World of the Americas.
When he got back to his people, they ordered him to South America, and he wasn't allowed to come back up north no more. And that's where Coronado took over and looking for the 7 cities of gold.
You have to remember what was happening historically at the time the Spanish were just discovering the Americas. And when someone like De Vaca comes back home and tells you that he had spent time in the control of the Indians and that there are huge riches stashed in almost every mountain and canyon, you're gonna listen to him. Cortez had already sent word home that he had seen many of the same things, and in fact, he returned to Spain with a vast amount of gold and silver, enough to make him a very rich man. So what would you do? You would do exactly what the Spaniards did. You would send men like Coronado and Narvaez with an army to search out this treasure and bring it back to Spain.
Some historians have suggested that the Aztecs' efforts to elude the Spanish explorers and conquerors would take them on a journey for hundreds of miles to a land that they considered their place of origin, the land of Aztlan, a fabled place of Aztec lore that was the birthing place of the Aztec people, a place that many now believe is located deep in the modern-day southwestern United States.
Aztlan was the original homeland of the Aztec people before they migrated south into Mexico. If you look at the actual known migration patterns of modern man across the land bridge and into the Americas, then it becomes very understandable that they would continue south as far as Mexico and beyond. The weather patterns of Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado have always been fairly inhospitable. So early inhabitants would have had to find ways to protect themselves while they were living in caves and natural shelters that could afford them that certain level of protection from the harsh summers and winters.
I would say Aztlan is up there in the southern part of Utah, in some volcanic areas with underground chambers that would they have a complete cities under there.
In the very near future, we may find that we have a pinpoint location of Aztlan. It may be the Four Corners area. It may be the lake in the middle of the Great Salt Lake with the 7 caves. It may be Arizona. It may be anywhere along in the southwest, northern Mexico. But we may very well find that point.
The road to Aztlan begins someplace north of Utah.
On July 1st, 2004, near Range Creek, Utah, an incredible 4,500-year-old site was announced to the world. We are just seeing the tip of the iceberg in relation to what is being discovered now in the area of Utah. And Utah very well may be the America's Valley of the Kings.
The search for hidden treasure in the Pacific Southwest is not a new phenomenon. Many have claimed rich treasures exist in the vast wilderness mountains and deserts of the Four Corner states of New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. Stories of hidden and natural treasures have proliferated over the last 4 centuries. The renowned explorer Francisco Vasquez de Coronado himself would travel north in 1540 from Mexico with a vast army into the Americas, as far as the state of Kansas, in search of a treasure of Aztec gold in the fabled 7 cities of Cibola, or the 7 cities of gold.
When Coronado came through there, and he asked them, where's the 7 cities? And they pointed to the north, straight north, just keep going.
The 7 cities of Cibola was always just a myth. And the Spanish, in teaching the history of Spanish exploration, that's always one of the reasons given that they pushed northward after landing in Mexico.
When Coronado first came north seeking the Aztecs' treasure, or Montezuma's gold, he sent several scouts ahead in different directions to recon the most likely escape route the Aztecs would have taken.
And they hit the Grand Canyon and they came back and they said, you can't go that way, so he turned east.
So in one of history's greatest blunders, he took their word for it, that the way was impassable. And so they headed northeast instead, traveling as far as what we know as the state of Kansas, looking for the Aztecs and their treasure. Clearly, these natives knew that this path was dangerous, even for them. and for the Spaniards, hopefully deadly, so that they would no longer pick up on their trail.
Although he would never find them. The elusive golden treasure of Montezuma would also become known as Coronado's gold, and Coronado's failed efforts to find it would forever mildly overshadow his rightful place in history as an explorer in the New World. To this day, little has been found to support most of the claims of vast riches existing in the deserts of the southwestern United States. But there have been a number of alluring clues and the occasional rash of minor discoveries of gold, hidden Indian burials, and ancient artifacts that could indicate that the Aztecs did find their way to the great land to the north. Many of these clues may also point tantalizingly to the possibility that they may have actually assisted in building other new settlements in this strange land. And there are few scholars who would contest the ancient Aztec people's cultural link to the indigenous Pueblo Indian people of the Americas.
There are many tribes that claim heritage to the Aztec people of Mexico. The Anasazi are one of those people from which the Aztecs were historically claimed to have originated from. And definitely the Pueblo Indians stake claim to Aztec ancestry. And places like Chaco Canyon in New Mexico are likely heavily influenced by the astrological calendar and religious influences of the Aztecs, or possibly even predates them.
The calendar of the Native Americans 2,000 years before Christ was more accurate than our calendars.
These people were not ordinary people. These people had special powers. These people knew the elements. These people knew the sun, the moon, the stars in a way that we've lost today.
I think that the Hopi people, or their ancestors, are the ones that founded Chaco Canyon. They probably also founded Mesa Verde, as they scattered out.
We have even found a perfect 9.5 ring spiral just like the one at Chaco Canyon, so this proves that there's a connection.
If the great Aztec people did come to North America in their flight from the Spaniards, what evidence is there to prove that they brought with them the wealth of Montezuma's gold?
Pueblo Indians who live in the area of Arizona and New Mexico call their cliff dwellings Montezuma's castles. Also, the town of Quintana in Texas, in the Gulf, was founded in 1528 by a group of Spaniards of the Narvaez expedition that went north looking for the gold. So these two facts point to some certainty that the gold is north.
So you want somewhere that you know intimately, that you feel safe that this great treasure is going to be at. And here again, Utah, the mountains, they would have had some religious significance as well, because that's home, that's where they came from. So there's a religious tie, a spiritual tie, as well as a physical tie. And so you're going to go where your gods were so that they can protect it, as well as the fact that you know the countryside, you know who's there, you know who's going to protect it.
It has been suggested that there may be a link connecting the Spaniards to the Peralta stone tablets, but like all other beliefs about the tablets, there has been very little direct evidence to date that can prove this theory other than, as some would suggest, the Spanish writing on the tablets themselves, which begs the question, who may have authored these mysterious tablets?
What is confusing most people about the tablets is the 1847 carved in the cutout of the heart stone. Some people think that it's a date, but my grandfather says it's not. But then again, you have to understand the author to understand the markings on the stones.
Bob Corbin, who used to be the Attorney General of Arizona, he had these maps sent back to the FBI lab. And they said they were more than 100 years old because of the technology used to make them.
De Vaca is a perfect candidate to have carved the stones because the stones are written in Spanish and because he was there at the time relative to when they could have been created.
I believe that it was De Vaca. I think he's planning to come back. Because you figure you're taken to all these 7 cities with all this gold. And gold is power, money's power.
De Vaca didn't have access to pen and parchment, so he would have had to use whatever means at his disposal to document what he knew, so he or someone else who would follow him could come back later when they were more able to take advantage of the knowledge that he had obtained during his ordeal.
The way they were made, how they were made, what material was used, the sandstone, the time that was took in these precise markings, they're not just like someone would want to inscribe a note into something.
I don't think you can ever say with any degree of certainty that it is a fact or that something is there until you actually find it. But my grandfather, based on his 40 years of research, believed that he knew the locations where the Aztecs brought the gold from Mexico.
They excited him, the maps, because it was something that he read that people couldn't figure out.
At first, everyone questioned Ray's ability to resolve the mystery of the stone tablets. Cryptographers, mathematicians, and scholars from all over the world had already tried and failed to make any sense out of the enigmatic tablets. How could Ray Dillman, a sweet, uneducated common man with no training, hope to accomplish what so many other intellectual men had attempted and failed? Oh, and there was one more obstacle for Ray. Since the age of 7, Ray Dillman had been legally blind. Though Ray was blind, he spent the better part of the next 17 years researching the information that he felt he would need to solve the mystery of the stone tablets.
As a blind man, they have to figure out everything piece by piece, you know. And they set up their house, they know how far to walk, turn to the right, the coffee's there. 2 more hand over is the sugar, and so on. See, so he took it step by step. And he was a young man when he started this. I mean, he figured everything out. And when he was ready, let's go, I got it.
Being someone on the outside looking in, you can't possibly imagine what it was like being with someone like my grandfather. He had an infectious gift and an understanding and intelligence that affected everyone that he knew. You would have to ask yourself, how could a blind man like my grandfather accomplish what he did and lead an expedition to a 1982 site to find a buried cave that contained a 5th tablet in a place he had never seen or never heard of before? It would have to be some kind of divine intervention, or else he really did decipher those tablets.
Here's a blind man that can take the stones and tell you what it says. They can tell you what they mean, everything. You don't have to make it up, he can show you.
Well, he told us that he was legally blind, but he could see. He said he would have his son take a picture. He'd bring that picture to him and he'd put it right up to his eye with a magnifying glass, and yeah, that's it, that's what we're looking for.
He knew he can break them because it was hard, something that he had to do. It's like he had to get around in the sighted world, which he was totally blind.
Ray contacted people from almost every corner of the world in his quest for information and clues that would solve the mystery.
If this is from the 15th century, you gotta say, okay, what did they have back in the 15th century? Black powder, pistols, axes. He says, you gotta use what they use. You gotta put yourself back in that time and say, this is all I got to work with to figure this out.
My grandfather spent 17 years immersing himself into history, legend, lore, and the mystery surrounding the Superstition Mountains and the stone tablets themselves. He would labor for hours going over everything he could get his hands on to even remotely relate it to the subject, and the fact that he was blind as a bat made it even that much more difficult for him.
Throughout the long years of research, Ray enlisted the help of his 2 sons, John and Paul, in his efforts. Inevitably, they too became entwined in the mystery of the stone tablets, and during those 17 years, they came across some startling facts and important clues that they hoped would lead them to what no one else had been able to find.
As soon as I got home, my father wouldn't even let me shower up or clean up or even eat. He says, I need you, and I need your brother, and I need to get going right now. We got to get up there, up north of Utah. I said, for what? Why? What? He says, I cracked it. He says, I finally got everything together. I've solved it. He says, now it's time to get up there and start doing some excavation, some digging.
In the summer of 1982, Ray asked his sons if they'd be willing to take a trip with him. He told them it was time to go and test their theories. It was time to seek out Aztlan and the treasure of Montezuma. Driven by their passion to find a buried fortune, the small band of treasure seekers embarked on a long journey from California to Utah, armed only with a plan in Ray's head, his personal notes on the stone tablets, and a determination to find something very special. They eventually ended up at a location in the Utah desert where Ray had precisely directed them. Their trail took them to a remote ranch owned by the Judd family of Utah.
We drove all night, all day, until we got right up to the spot where we wanted to dig. At this particular place, along the road there, my father says, I want you to stop here.
When he told him there was a road on the left-hand side, my grandfather told him to drive exactly 7.2 miles down that road and stop.
My dad says, can you see anything off to the left here? And I said, well, yeah, you got this mesa is almost as long as a canyon. He says, what else do you see there? I said, well, it looks like a farmhouse or a ranch where somebody's living. He says, I wanted to get up there. He says, I want to get to that house.
We met his wife and his daughter.
When they pulled up to my home, the dogs were barking really hard, and I looked out and I thought, oh my goodness, look at that sinister looking green van out there and those 3 pirates in it.
I guess she was hoping that we was lost because it looks like she didn't want nothing to do with us.
We introduced ourselves, and my father said, well, Mr. Judd, he goes, I'd like to look on your property for some buried treasure.
I'd gone to town, and I met my wife coming in. I was coming back, and she was going out, and she stopped me and said that these men behind her wanted to talk to me. And that's the first I had ever met Brother Dillman.
Mr. Judd said right away, he says, if this has anything to do with Freddie Crystal, I don't want nothing to do with it. Just get out of here and leave me alone.
My father says, who's Freddie Crystal?
In 1914, in a rugged and remote town in Utah, a red-headed man with gold teeth riding a bicycle and carrying a tattered map that he claimed led to the treasure of Montezuma pulled into town for the very first time.
My father studied more about Freddie Crystal, and Freddie Crystal was looking for this lost Montezuma's gold.
We have never heard of Freddie Crystal before, but his story really played right into my grandfather's theories about the stone tablets and where and what they were leading us to.
Freddie Crystal was here a couple of years the first time he came. And then he just came up missing, just picked up and left. Nobody knew where he went, but he lived with my mother on my mother's folks' ranch there at Johnson Canyon.
Freddie Crystal came to the southern part of Utah, and he had a portion of a map that he got from Mexico, and he was going to look for Montezuma's gold.
Freddie Crystal was so dedicated to the belief that the map he had reportedly stolen from a monastery near Sonora, Mexico was real, that he actually rode his bike several hundred miles carrying with him the map that he believed held the location to the treasure of the Aztec king Montezuma. The amazing thing is that the Dillman family, using only the stone tablets as a guide, would arrive at the same precise location almost 70 years later, and they would be seeking the exact same treasure.
Once Mr. Judd had told Grandfather about Freddie Crystal, it helped him to solidify his belief that he was on the right track. Grandpa and all of his research had never even read nor heard about Freddie Crystal. But here we are, introduced to a story of a man 70 years before Grandpa had arrived, using the stone tablets as his reference. And this man had claimed to have an old map from a monastery in Sonora, Mexico, that was purportedly to lead to the treasure of Montezuma. And it led him not only to the same general area, but the exact same starting location that Grandpa had arrived at. Grandpa and everyone else were astonished by the fact here at last was corroborating evidence from a completely different and unconnected source, confirming we were in the right place.
When Freddie came back to Utah nearly 8 years after his first unsuccessful attempt to find the treasure, he was more than sure that he had finally hit pay dirt. So much so that he had actually filed a claim on a place called White Mountain. His belief and his theory was so infectious that eventually he was able to enlist many in the town to participate in his claim with the assurance of payment, and Montezuma's final hiding place was exhumed.
When he came back into the area, he had the other half a map. And to make the story even more appealing, he had been shot and knifed and you know, had some close encounters.
Most of the people in town went out there and was digging.
One believer he would recruit to his efforts was a lifelong resident of the town named Cowhide Adams, who many would say was with Freddie to the very end.
Cowhide Adams explaining to my father how him and Freddie dug out this cave and how Freddie Crystal busted his leg, got pinned by a boulder that came right out the wall, just like Indiana Jones. It sounds funny, but it's true. And so him and Cowhide Adams were very close, almost friends.
Freddie Crystal's search would linger on for years until one day a discovery was made that brought the whole town running with their shovels. The word was that Freddie and Cowhide had uncovered a hidden tunnel whose opening was sealed with granite and mortar not generally found in that area. At last, had they found the secret hiding place of a king's fortune.
People who had laughed at Freddie for years were now probably ready to drop everything and take up shovels to find out what was in that tunnel.
They found one tunnel, and all it was packed sand, mortar wall on each side.
When word reached town about what Freddie and Cowhide had discovered, I think everyone just knew that when they opened up that passageway, there would be gold sitting there just behind the door.
Everybody was really excited. You know, they went in there and they cleaned out the main caves. Oh, we're right there, and it's always been that way. It's right there, it's right there.
Imagine their surprise when they tear down the brick and mortar and see that the tunnel was actually filled in with dirt. Someone had actually gone to all the trouble to refill the tunnel with several 100,000 metric tons of dirt and debris, and then carefully sealed it up again.
But much to Freddie's and the town people's dismay, no artifacts or anything of any significant monetary value would ever be uncovered.
This dummy cave, really, because it was empty, was designed there to keep people busy, possibly killed, so they wouldn't get to the other sites.
And they all came back to the fact that they needed to start from the bottom instead of being up so high. And all they did is just add more overburden to the stuff that needed to be moved.
There's been a lot of people in there digging. Still are, I think, go in there hoping that they can find what Freddie didn't find, but I don't think they'll ever find it.
The fact that they never found anything of value inside the mountain has to make you wonder what might have been there at some time in the past.
Disillusioned and angry, the townspeople would write him off as a nutcase, and Freddie would end up disappearing almost instantly without a trace.
One day he came up missing, and the old man Judd, his daddy was working with Freddie Crystal, and he told me that his daddy told him that somebody killed Freddie Crystal up there near where they lived, and they don't know if it was for the maps or what.
In fact, Freddie's disappearance from Utah was so swift and complete that some have suggested that Freddie might have been done in by angry townspeople. Others simply say that Freddie Crystal, broken and ashamed, got back on his bicycle and pedaled away into obscurity.
If you tried to find out what happened to Freddie Crystal, you really won't have much luck. He just disappears from the face of the earth, sometime shortly after his discovery in Utah. But Cowhide Adams told my grandfather that he was found 7 miles outside of town with his throat cut and his maps missing. That is really not too unbelievable. When you're looking for treasure and people think you have something valuable, they want it. And you spend a lot of time in a remote location, things can get very dangerous very quickly. And I've seen it myself.
Since the early 1900s, when Freddie Crystal last graced the bicycle paths of Utah, there were few truly notable chapters written to the history or about the continuing search for Montezuma's gold or the true meaning of the mysterious stone tablets. It would not be until 1982, when the Dillman family would arrive in Utah, that anything of significance would be uncovered to suggest that the stone tablets might actually contain some shred of truth.
Well, he come in and said he was looking for the Montezuma treasure, and he'd already told my wife that he thought it was there on our property. And I said, well, that'd be quite a coincidence, where Freddie Crystal lived on that property for 4 or 5 different years and never found anything. So to have someone else come in and say, well, it's here somewhere, it's here. because the signs are all saying it's here.
We have a limited resource. We're there for a short period of time, and who shows up to motivate us? Raymond Dillman. And he has some information that's could be valid.
And he says, well, Mr. Dillman, what is buried here? My father says, a quarter mile down the way, you got a 9-spiral circle. A little ways from that, on top of the hill, you got a sacrificial altar. And right over here to this hill, by your house, there's a carving of a horse, the 3 circles. And Mr. Judd looked at him and says, you people never been on my property. I've never seen you in my life. And you know where everything's at on my property?
He says, how about if I have a contract written up with my lawyer, and then you sign the contract, and I'll start showing you where to dig.
And they intrigued us.
Old man Judd says, you go get your contract, bring it back, I'll look it over, I'll sign it, and then he says, then maybe we can start to work on this thing.
Ty and my son signed an agreement if we found any gold that he could have a portion of it.
After an initial agreement was reached between the Dillman family and the Judd family and a contract was signed, the search on the Judd property began in earnest, and in relatively little time, the most amazing artifacts began to appear.
Everybody was excited. It's just like one family. You know, we're helping them out, and they're asking us, well, what is this? How do you read this? And how do you decipher this? And my father is teaching them how to break down these symbols and what to look for.
He said that he had had some tablets, and he'd been studying these tablets for quite a few years, and that from all the indications and everything that he could decipher from through his studying of these tablets, that it had led him to the White Mountains, and actually right to Johnson Canyon, and to the point where he could actually pinpoint how many miles he needed to go up that canyon and which side of the canyon he needed to be on to find the symbols. And so it was very intriguing to us that he could come right there, right to the house, and we could actually show him what he was looking for.
We start digging. My father direct Von Judd and his son with a backhoe where to dig.
We determined that the first place we was going to dig is right where Raymond said the treasure was, underneath the circle.
This particular spiral was an extremely large spiral, probably 4 or 5 times larger than what you would normally see. It was probably 8 to 10 feet in diameter.
He identified that as the treasure being, you know, so many veras down underneath.
He goes, we'll climb on top of the plateau and see what's above that. So when I got up on top, I told him, well, it's the altar. It's a sacrificial altar.
Right off the side of the sacrificial stone, we found what we termed as the heart stone, where they would actually kill the Indians or whoever they were killing and cut their heart out, and then they'd actually let the heart bleed in the stone right off to the side right there, and then the blood would run right off the face and right down into where this cave was. Above this cave there was quite a few marks etched into it, and so we decided to go ahead and start excavating that out, and we started, and that was a major project, probably about 60 feet of dirt we had to move.
As we got to one part of the ledge, as I did, and moved the dirt away, I noticed writing, and it wasn't the petroglyph writing, it was actually written with, it looked like they'd mixed up clay. It was blue in color.
Now, the blue clay is a symbol for royalty.
It was very interesting, and of course we showed that to Raymond when he came back, and he felt that was, that I remember, he said that was definitely, in his view, Spanish writing. We started at the top and came clear down, and we stayed right close to the sandstone and worked it down to the, to the point where we were about 40 or 50 feet from the symbol down.
One of the boys said, well, what's that? And reached up there and this pot rolled out, and of course they thought it was a head.
He says, oh no, it's not a skull, it's a pot.
We found a pot that had 213 pieces of turquoise in it.
But when we got down in there a little farther, why, we got into where the Indians had lived.
In that particular area there, we found a woven basket and a little bag that's got the oldest known knot that we know, which is the fisherman's knot, and in it was full of some kind of hair.
They found a complete sewing kit with bone needles, a woven bag containing what we have been told is llama hair, and several pieces of finely woven cloth, and several very old woven bed mats. One of the mats was tested by a source that dated it back to about 2,000 years.
Like I said, where he got his information, I don't know. But he knew what everything was.
Though they were all happy to find that Ray had been correct in pinpointing a location based on the information from the tablets, they were all amazed that he seemed to know so much more about what they were finding so many feet under the Utah dirt.
The more we dug, the more we found.
Sure enough, we uncovered and we unearthed a kiva, a burial place, and there were 3 skeletons in it. Keep in mind, Raymond had said that we would be finding 3 bodies.
They dug out the crypts, and then like crypts are perfectly round.
2 of them were empty. One of them looked like it just been used as a fire pit. And the third one had a very large statue man in it.
But inside the chest cavity, I mean, it was actually in dirt, so you're underneath the body. We found a bundle of bark. So we opened that bark and it revealed, I think 6 or 7 arrowheads and looked like a rock nodule.
It's round and you could put your fingers on it like that. It's kind of indented right there, and then on the biggest one is where the Masonic sign was at.
You couldn't cut it with a torch. You take a steel file and start filing on it, and it cuts the file teeth right off. You can't cut it. Ain't no way. Heat won't do it. Torch won't do it. Hammer won't bend it, nothing. We tried everything.
We went on digging a couple days after that, you know, in the soil and around, and we kind of worked around a little point and come upon another body.
And he was missing one leg. And I held the main bone up to my leg, and it was at least 6 inches longer than I am, and I'm 6 foot, so that made him a pretty tall man.
And with him was the 5th stone tablet. It was basically right then and there that everyone knew that grandfather had been right.
And his skull, as near as we could tell, was of a dark man.
My grandfather said that it was his belief that Cabeza de Vaca and Estevanico the Black carved the tablets.
Apparently, Estevanico learned a lot from the natives, because when he got to Mexico City, the first thing he did is decide to come with Coronado. And so he came back with Coronado, and out here when they were in the Great Plains of America, he became one of the guides and disappeared one day, and everybody thought, well, they must have gotten killed.
The story goes that Stephen Estevanico had one of his legs missing, and he stayed there and married an Indian squaw.
Legends of Native Americans have it that somehow he joined the natives against the Spanish, and that he apparently married and had family, and that Popeye, who led the Pueblo Revolt in 1680, was really a descendant of Estevanico.
Almost immediately, and during the 3 months that followed after the initial meeting of the 2 families and the signing of the agreement to equally split the proceeds from their discovery deep in the earth, there began to be some dissension between the 2 groups. One day, the relationship between the 2 families irreparably disintegrated when Vaughn Judd, suspecting that workers who had been enlisted by the Dillman family were stealing small artifacts from the site. And with no further explanation to the Dillman family, Vaughn Judd told Ray Dillman and his group to clear out and never come back. Ray attempted to enforce their agreement, and it was then that the 2 men began to fiercely argue.
Bruce walked over to the van, and looked in. And he's seen these artifacts, Indian artifacts that they'd picked up and were carrying away. And the agreement was they wouldn't take anything off the property without telling me.
And without ever talking about it or even asking my grandfather about it, the Judds immediately thought the worst, and all hell broke loose.
Judd came up to us, red-faced, said, "Get the hell off my land."
And I don't think he trusted us in the beginning, because at that particular time when he ran us off the property, he had a gun right there in his waist side.
And my father says, "What do you mean?" He said, "Just get the hell off my land. You heard me. Now, or I'll shoot you and your family."
My brother yelled out to me, "Dad says get the tools, get the camera, get everything. We gotta get the hell out of here right now."
That if they had resisted and not immediately left when he told them to, he would have buried them right there, and we'd be possibly digging up a few modern-day skeletons on that site today.
My father said, "Well, I got a contract with you." He says, "That contract ain't worth the pile of beans it was written on."
I says, "I see you've got a few things there in the back of the truck, and you weren't going to tell me anything about them, so I says, when you get out that gate, I don't want to see you back here anymore." And that ended it. They never, ever came back.
Ray told me that the arrangement went sour and that the man pulled a gun on him and told him to get off or he was going to let him have it.
An unknown miner in the California gold rush was once quoted as saying, "When you find gold, you'll usually find lead behind it." And that appeared to be the case in this instance. At once, all of the hopes and dreams of the Dillman family seemed dashed. There did not appear to be any way to resolve the disagreement between the families, and the Judd family was no longer willing to share the artifacts that were unearthed. Vaughn Judd also made it plain and clear that they did not want the Dillmans to ever come back again.
My father broke down and cried. You know, after all the years of reading and research and studying it and getting this close.
After my father actually found out what happened and why a gun was involved and the threats, then Judd's family told my dad what these two guys in our group were doing. My father said, "I wish you would have said something right there. We could have cleared it up there."
When we finally went back about a year or so ago, I asked Mr. Judd face to face about the gun incident. He got very insulted and almost threw me out of his house. I tried to let him know that we had no hard feelings over it and that we were willing to let the past remain in the past. I really do think that he now realizes he overreacted to the situation.
It would seem that the man who had spent 17 years of his life searching for the lost treasure would have no choice but to walk away with nothing to show for it. But unbeknownst to the others, Ray Dillman had made numerous personal notes and had collected drawings made from all of the carved signs and painted symbols that they had found at the Judd site. He had also had photos taken of the fifth tablet that had been found to help him determine additional sites that would be the next logical step in their search to find the treasure. So as they drove away, empty-handed from a hard-earned and priceless discovery on that hot, dry Utah day, though heartbroken, Ray knew that the search was far from over.
To say that my grandfather was crushed about what happened would be an understatement to the highest degree. There is still a lot to be uncovered at this site, and there really needs to be a scientific examination of what has already been uncovered. My grandfather believed that what was found there is really just the tip of the iceberg, and the Judds themselves have told me directly that they just gave up digging after a while because there were too many bodies, and they were just feeling ill from this death feeling that they had.
But he says, "I wanted to keep this all intact because everything that we're doing, everything that we're finding, everything that the stone tablets lead you to, and then the fifth tablet leads you to another place, another location." He says, "I have to keep this all together."
I never saw any kind of hatred or any kind of problem there. It never seemed like it, when I was around him, that it ever bothered him. He just kept going, and he was just dogged after to complete these tablets, to break this stuff, and to get what he had to get done.
Years would pass before the Dillman family thought it would be safe again to seek out treasure in the isolated deserts of Utah. Unfortunately for Ray, he would never again have the opportunity to venture out. Ray Dillman became ill and passed away in 1992. he would never experience the end of the search that his efforts and painstaking research had spawned. And today, only his personal records, artifacts held by the Judd family, and a photograph of the fifth stone tablet are known to exist by the remaining Dillman family.
He only grabbed me by the back of the head and pulled me close to his cheek and told me how far north I have to go through the canyon, what to look for, how to solve the mystery of the numbers on the stone tablets. You know what some of the carvings mean? He says you have to get back up there. And he says you have to finish the job. He says, I know I'll never get out of this hospital. And right after he told that to me, he stopped breathing. And all I could do was just tell my father, okay, I understand, but I wasn't listening to him, because at the time he was dying in my hands. I wanted my father alive. I didn't care about no treasure or nothing. But he argued with me. He says, I'm not getting out of here. He says, I won't be with you. You'll have to do this on your own. I said, Daddy, I can't do this. He says, you know enough. He says, don't be stubborn. Do what I tell you. Remember what I showed you. And from that day on, I promised my father that I would solve the mystery for him.
He's just a good pop. I mean, he took care of us best he could. He was there for us all the time.
So he spent the last part of his days in his life researching and writing down his findings. He wanted to do a book on everything he found and what he believed. Now, he was able to put together a partial transcript before the good Lord called him back. And based on that information provided to us by my grandfather's documents, writings, and notes, we have been able to locate at least 2 other sites referred to by the fifth tablet.
During their infrequent trips to the Superstition Mountains, the Dillman family has now found promising signs at the other sites that Ray had determined deserve excavation. Cursory finds at these locations lend them to believe that the treasure of Montezuma is not only a reality, but is still out there, close by, just waiting to be discovered.
This blind man was able to have this vision and this quest to crack these tablets that were, no one knew what to do with them for years.
And that stone tablet that we found on Judd's property in the cave tells you where to go from there.
I think that there is enough evidence to say that what we are looking for is out there, and Montezuma's treasure is a reality. If the historical records are correct, then it would be a more significant find than the tomb of Tutmosis in Egypt. The estimated value that the Spaniards placed on this treasure would be somewhere in the range of $4 to $5 billion in today's currency. And that is, in my mind, a cautious estimate. Some people don't even believe that it exists at all and say that it would be impossible to hide a treasure of that size for so many centuries. But the truth is that the Four Corners area is really a dangerous, remote, and fairly unexplored area. We Europeans have only had a very short time to be able to access it, and it is the perfect place to hide something you don't want found.
The youngest member of the Dillman family to share in the dream has helped to refocus the search and has brought new technology and a new philosophy to Ray's vision. No longer is gold and treasure the most important reason to continue the search. Now it has become a pursuit of truth, a simple quest for answers.
I think Dan's helped to pull us all together, and it's just the right timing, good timing. He's got some great skills and be able to handle all of us, because we're not all lovable at all the times. And he's done a good job of pulling us all together and letting us know what had to be done, what needed to be done. And this is his grandfather's thing, and I know he's proud of him, and like I am.
He's kind of like the leader, you know. You got young blood, new ideas, and he's very smart in that. And see, everybody that's in this, everybody got your own ideas and your own beliefs, see? And he'll come up with something that me and my brother probably miss.
My nephew gave us the knowledge to get to the end of the journey and to solve the greatest mystery of one of the most famous treasure stories in the world.
What the Dillmans undeniably have done is added their own chapter in the story of the Peralta stone tablets. What they have uncovered are facts and evidence that the tablets may actually lead to something after all, and that the Aztec people and their ancient mythical homeland of Aztlan may actually have existed and could have been located right here in North America.
We have come closer than anyone else in the fact that we can show, based on my grandfather's work, that these stone tablets do actually lead somewhere. The American Indian people know that these mountains and canyons are a sacred place, and we want to assure everyone, including them, that it is not our intent to destroy any site or any artifact that we find. We feel that it is of the utmost importance that the truth about the history of the Aztec people and their ancient homeland of Aztlan is revealed.
I personally believe that that treasure does belong to the Indians, and at the time that it's going to be found, the way will be opened up and it will be found for a specific purpose, and I think it will be associated with their needs.
So a new generation, 20 years after the last important discovery, has risen up to put the pieces of the puzzle surrounding the stone tablets back together, and has breathed new life into Ray Dillman's last wishes.
These sites are real, but I don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. So we are putting together a scientific team who's experienced and able to excavate new sites in a more scientific manner.
Dan Dillman, with the help of his uncles and a hand-picked team of specialists, are prepared to pick up the gauntlet and accept the challenge to find an end to the mystery of the stone tablets. They have brought new expertise and fresh ideas to the venture that may finally provide the last link in the chain of events will allow them to solve this mystery once and for all.
The writings that we're finding, the further we dig, the more we find, the closer it looks that they were here. There's no question about that.
My grandfather started out by looking for a treasure, but what he found was a quest, a life goal to solve the mystery of the stone tablets. And he has also found a profound respect for the people who came before us.
If they never did anything else, the Dillman family's discovery of ancient writings, precious stones, artifacts, and another stone tablet have added a valuable archaeological link in the chain connecting the stone tablets to so many legends. Their contribution in seeking the truth may one day very soon help solve the mystery of the Lost Dutchman mine, end the search for Coronado's fabled 7 cities of gold, and possibly even resolve the mystery surrounding the origins of the Aztec people and the location of Montezuma's lost treasure. Is it possible that so many legends, each bearing a minuscule grain of truth, could all historically collide in a single set of simple stone tablets?
It's an adventure. It's no different than trying for the lottery. It's no different than going to Hawaii or going on a cruise or anything. It's still an adventure. And some people would rather have an adventure out here hunting for gold than they would, say, going into a crowded Hawaiian beach or going to Guam or going to Hong Kong or wherever. I mean, it's all in what you love. And these guys that really hunt the mine love what they do.
You know, when you track history, you look for a lost mine, you're walking in the footsteps of those that have been before you, such as the Dutchman himself. When we're out there tracking that, we're stepping in the same footsteps of him, he who has gone before, and those that'll come after.
It's expanding American history before it was called America.
Any treasure story, if it's never solved, it'll always keep people looking, it'll always keep people dreaming, and it'll live on forever.
And all the years of searching in a dream, it's something you can't give up. If you give up life itself. It's a belief in a dream that keeps you going.
Imagine the possibilities if my grandfather is right. We will solve the secrets of the stone tablets. We'll locate Montezuma's treasure and solve the mystery surrounding the origins and the disappearance of the ancient Aztec people and resolve once and for all the location of their ancient homeland of Aztlan and the myths about the 7 cities of Cibola.
If we find Montezuma's gold, what we actually would have found is the mythical place of origin of the Aztecs, Aztlan.
You're going to find exactly what happened with the Aztecs, the conquistadors, and the local Indians. All this is going to be uncovered. The truth is going to be uncovered.
We know the answers are out there. Who can honestly say that we may very well be the chosen ones.
Ray Dillman will not be there to see if the dreams and visions he had or the discovery of gold and treasure he envisioned in his life would come to pass. He will not physically share in the ultimate discovery or see the end of the adventure he embarked on over 40 years ago. But his family, his sons and his grandson, who have all shared in his dream, know that the day they make the next astounding discovery, Ray Dillman will be there in spirit, and his legacy will be that he alone was the man who made it possible to solve the secrets of the stone tablets. I'm Charles Richardson. Thank you for watching.